Well, happy to be joined once again by Nick Pollack, the founder of Pitcher List, expert on all things pitching. Nick, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
No, thank you so much for having me.
So we've heard from Mike Elias and company, and it's kind of the buzz around the Orioles all off season long, that they're going to be looking for a frontline starting pitcher. But you've got guys like Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means. Do you think the Orioles necessarily need to go after one of the top guys on the market? What kind of pitcher makes sense to pair with the guys that they currently have in-house?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, it's about the back half, not really the top half, because after Grayson Rodriguez, Kyle Bradish, and John Means, you don't really know where your innings are coming from. We've seen a lot of great things from a lot of those guys, from Cole Irvin having some productive innings last season, Tyler Wells being so good before he then returned and transitioned into more of a relief role. We don't really know if he's going to step up again to be that starting rotation asset. Dean Kramer really surprised us as well. He had maybe some starts from Bruce Zimmerman and Keegan Aiken and some guys in the in AAA as well with Chase McDermott and Cade Bovich who could show up. But you really need some more stability there, and it's less about Means, Bradish, and Grayson, because you know that you're going to get productivity there. The difference of saying, hey, we have Lucas Giolito now versus finding that fifth guy is really the big difference maker there. So it's more about, to me, what do the Orioles really speak when it comes to their home field and what they've done well to bring out the most of the foreign pitchers that they've added. And you could say, okay, this is a team that has an infield defense that is still improving and a better an outfield defense. And of course, we like to say Baltimore with that left field wall in Camden. So guys that have home run issues as the biggest factor for them might actually benefit signing with the Orioles, and that would be Lucas Giolito, who allowed a monstrous 2 home runs per 9 last year, and the best in the league are guys who have under 1 homer per 9. So the fit there does make sense, and there is even more ceiling to get with Lucas Giolito. But really, it's just about finding innings that you can trust, which means I wouldn't necessarily go for the high upside kind of free agent, say like James Paxton, for example, who should find a team and give you something, but really with the Orioles rotation, you're looking for something that you can trust every 5 days through the season.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue into my next question. You mentioned the home run rate maybe being a factor. It's easy to look at things like ERA and WHIP, but when you're looking at a starting pitcher, what are some things that would indicate that maybe they're an Orioles kind of guy?
Yeah, for me, it's really funny. We used to say back in the day that the Orioles did not like cutters. It was something that they told Dylan Bundy, saying, hey, let's move away from that. And we kind of saw over time that they have pulled back from it. And the Orioles have been really receptive of it, to the point that Jack Flaherty, when he arrived, all of a sudden started throwing more cutters, and it had some success early on for him. And I would look for guys that actually can get the most out of their secondaries instead of trying to overwhelm with fastballs. We've seen that with Kyle Bradish this past year, where he really adapted away from his fastball, embraced that slider, embraced that curveball, actually added the sinker, and that really helped him turn into the pitcher we saw in that second half. So I would look to guys that aren't really overwhelming with fastballs. And really the one that sticks out to me is Michael Wacha, as a guy who has pristine command. His changeup just is absolutely phenomenal. And I think the Orioles are an organization that would bring in Wacha and really lean on that. And I think that could be a fantastic fit who doesn't cost as much as some of the other guys. And you can even look at Nick Martinez as well, who transitioned to be a starter at the beginning and the end of the season for the Padres, has not really had that opportunity to go every 5 days. But I think the Orioles could say, look, Nick Martinez, that sinker and that four-seamer combo aren't working as well as you wanted it to be before, but you have this great curveball, you have this great changeup and cutter, and I think the Orioles could really extract the most out of him. So less so of the overpowering high, here's my fastball, go and deal with it kind of guys, more of the ones that know how to nibble around the edges and get out a lot out of their secondaries, and there's some fun guys on the wire, or really the free agent market right now that the Orioles could be targeting to fill those voids.
Yeah, you mentioned Wacha, you mentioned Martinez. Who are some other guys potentially in that group that would make sense in Baltimore?
Yeah, I always joke with my colleague Alex Fast about Wade Miley being just made to be an Oriole once again. But actually a really sneaky one that I would love for the Orioles to go after is Tyler Mahle, who's going to be recovering from Tommy John surgery. But I talk about the home run rates being a big issue for some of these guys, and they could be really beneficial joining the Orioles given their situation. And Mahle, it's bread and butter right there. He's a guy who dealt with home runs in Cincinnati a ton. And now he's probably looking for a 2-year deal so that he can recover from Tommy John. But this could be a real big impact for 2025 and beyond if you go for that one. Obviously, there's the Jordan Montgomery situation. I personally think that the Orioles are going to go a different direction there. Shota Imanaga honestly sounds like the best fit for me. Imanaga is a guy who is not going to get the same kind of deal as Yamamoto. However, he does have a well-versed repertoire, very deep with 4 pitches. His four-seamer does not look like your 96, 97 on the gun, electrifying. However, it does miss bats well, and he's able to utilize all of his tools to get the most out of the team behind him. So I think Imanaga is a guy that can go 6 innings constantly and really be that rock that they're looking for without spending the upper-tier money that maybe Giolito and Yamamoto and maybe even Montgomery might be getting.
Well, definitely some names to keep an eye on there in the free agent market. If the Orioles don't decide to go to the free agency route and instead look to maybe trade for a pitcher, we've heard kind of the same names tossed around for a while now with Dylan Cease, Shane Bieber, those types of pitchers. Who are some names that you think the Orioles could be looking at potentially on the trade market rather than free agency?
Sure. Dylan Cease doesn't really seem like the Orioles type, being more of the lack of command and inconsistency start to start. And I don't think that that's the perfect fit for the Orioles, as it's not necessarily looking for that big upside, the big volatile kind of pitcher, more of the stable rock that you can depend on while Grayson improves him. Bradish is there, and Means is also, of course, a fantastic SP3 there. So I wouldn't necessarily go for Cease, but Shane Bieber, even though he isn't the star of previous seasons, he's a year before the end of his contract. He could be a really good short-term add here for the Orioles, as his slider, cutter, and curveball still have elements that could be more of that excellent starter, but just not quite that sub-3 ERA, ton of strikeouts guy, but could be really effective for the Orioles. And if you really want to go for it, obviously Corbin Burns is on the last year of his contract. There have been a lot of whispers about this, especially with Brandon Woodruff being out for the year. The Brewers feel like they are in a selling moment. And the Orioles, well, I mean, we all know that they have the pieces to get a starter just for 1 year. It's not going to be the big blockbuster deal considering it's just 1 year left in the contract. So Burns could be someone that could fit really well, much better than, say, Tyler Glasnow, who, again, is more of a volatile pitcher.
Yeah, and we know the Orioles, as you mentioned, have the pieces to get just about anybody in baseball. And finally, as we've been talking about the Orioles adding another starting pitcher, we know the 4, Bradish, Rodriguez, Means, Kramer, are pretty solidly locked in. If they add another guy, that could potentially bump out somebody like DL Hall or Tyler Wells. With those 2 guys specifically, what do you see their roles being in 2024?
I personally believe that Tyler Wells should be a starting pitcher. He showcased incredible command, locating upstairs with his fastball perfectly, changeups down and away, sliders down and in. It was beautiful. This is, of course, against lefties. And I think that he, of course, got fatigued at the end of the year, which is normal. But now give him another chance. He can go longer than those about 110, 120 innings that he had last season. He proved himself before. I think he's a perfect fit for that number 5. While DL Hall has the makings of a stud reliever, just like Josh Hader, who originally came up as a starting pitcher. It's a 2-pitch mix of overwhelming fastballs and deadly sliders from the left side. It preaches stud 8th inning, 9th inning. You might see him fall into that closer role this season. I think that's more likely for DL Hall. While Tyler Wells, I really do see more of the blueprint of being a starting pitcher than that shutdown 7th inning, 8th inning guy.
Well, that's a lot of good signs of a potential 100-win team when you're talking about a lot of good options for their number 4 or number 5 starter. And we'll see what route the Orioles decide to go in the offseason. And Nick Pollack has been joining us, helping us break it all down. Nick, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.